Hello, this is Vulturefire, and today's video is going to be a hopefully relatively short, although I want to say my last video that I did like this was like half an hour long, but relatively short video just talking through 10 cards from that I think have improved the most between last patch and this patch. So I did a similar video for the last patch, and this is a way to sort of go over some of the cards that I think changed that I want to talk about without having to go over all of the cards that changed, because a ludicrous number of cards changed. This time around, I'm only talking about generic cards. I plan to talk about the Merly rework probably in a separate video. And obviously the inner cards that changed are pretty notable, but this is just going to be talking about generic cards. So let's get into it. First of all, before we get into the main list, an honorable mention, Sanctuary. So you may say, Vulturefire, I know you really like Sanctuary. I know that you said it was the best card in the game, but it got nerfed. It did not improve. It costs another mana. It only gives you one tough instead of two. Those are bad things for, oh, and Cleanse got nerfed. So that is three ways in which Sanctuary is demonstrably a weaker card than it was on the last patch. How can you even justify an honorable mention? To which I would say, you're right, Cleanse did get nerfed. That just means it's more important than ever to have lots of Cleanse. And you know what gives you lots of Cleanse while giving you other value? That's right, Sanctuary. I legitimately think Sanctuary is still an incredibly valuable card, and I mostly am including it on this list to make it clear that I think that it is still the best defensive card in the game. I think if you are playing any deck that is not winning on turn one, you probably want Sanctuary. Regardless of which character you're playing, regardless of the nerf, it is still fantastic. You still want it. Yeah. Moving on to the actual list. Number 10 is Smite. So Smite is now a 4-mana spell. Deal 12 damage to the first two enemies. If this dealt 30 or more damage, you gain Purity 2 and cleanse yourself one time. And then when you upgrade it, it gets a base of 14 damage. And then you get Purity 2 and cleanse yourself 2 times. Oh, and it goes down to 3 mana instead of 4. So the first thing to notice here is that 30 damage requirement is lower than it looks, because you have to remember this hits the first two enemies. So if you have, say, Mighty and you're doing 25% more damage, 25% of 12 is 3. So that is 15 damage to the first two enemies. 15 plus 15, as you might be aware, is 30. So that's simple, a 25% damage improvement, and you are already at your target number. And obviously with Smite Plus, it's even easier to get there. And so you just need even a 10% damage boost. So if you're a Paladin and you have 10 shield, boom, Smite Plus is dealing 30 damage if you have two enemies. This does mean that going into, for example, the Maw fight, where this sort of effect is very valuable, you will need some amount of help in order to actually, it's a lot harder to get from 12 or 14 to 30 when you only are hitting one thing. But the payoff is absolutely worth it. And if you're playing like Naema or, again, Paladin, it's pretty easy for those characters to boost this up to hitting 30 even at one target. And this is, I talked with Sanctuary about how valuable Cleanse is. This is Purity and Cleanse and an okay amount of damage all in one card, all for a pretty reasonable price. Like I said, there are times you won't want this. If you're fighting into, for example, Hunt, and there's a lot of evasion you're going to have to deal with, that's a problem. If you are playing a character that isn't going to be able to boost this damage up, that can be a problem. But it is absolutely a card that I would recommend at least considering if you're used to just looking over it and ignoring it. Moving on to number 9, another card that you should at least consider if you're used to overlooking it, Gather Power. So Gather Power is now 1 mana, lose 1 Mighty. If you do, gain Powerful 2. This is a huge step up from where it was a couple patches ago. It, for a long time, it was lose 2 Mighty if you do get Powerful 1. And obviously, these numbers are quite a bit better. So one of the notes here is that since it now only costs you 1 Mighty, it's now a lot easier to fund that, especially if you have things like Heroic Vigor, or if you've got New Treasures can do it. Or if you've got Naema's Incandescent Ritual, you can do Ritual of Body. Or no, it's Ritual of Metal, I believe. Mettle is the one that gives you... No, Ritual of Might. Ritual of Might. Final answer. It's Ritual of Might gives you Mighty. Anyway, Lots of ways to do that. It's a lot easier to then play it multiple times in one turn. I likely won't upgrade this. Like I said, 2 Mighty is a lot harder of a thing to hit. But this is now the only common way to stack powerful, or one of the only ones. It's probably the most consistent one. Your other way is like treasures, which is not going to be consistent because then you've got to be using treasure hunt. But it does go well with treasure hunt because the treasure hunt card that stacks powerful also gives you mighty. And so yeah, just this is now an actually efficient way. The other thing is, like I said, like this used to be powerful 1. Powerful 2 is actually a meaningful number. You can actually use this to stack an amount of powerful that will make a difference. I think I've recorded at least 1 run, maybe 2, with a Salon Gather Power list that I think is pretty effective. And that will be up at some point. Moving on from Gather Power, the next one on the list is Curse of Decrepitude. So this one used to be, there used to be a weak, frail, vulnerable sub-theme where you had a bunch of cards that were like, do thing if the thing is weak, do thing if the thing is frail, do thing if the enemy is vulnerable. And that theme was bad, and the cards with it have been changed because like during the beta, we had a lot of people trying to make that deck work, and it just never quite felt good. It always felt like, why am I doing this instead of something better? And this is now something better. So Curse of Decrepitude is now a 2-cost skill. Give Curse 2 to any enemy, and then draw 3 if any enemy has 10 or more ranks of Curse. So getting 10 Curse on an enemy is now even easier than it used to be for a couple reasons. Several cards I'm going to talk about later, actually, including the next one and then one that is further up the list. And then it's worth noting, you don't have to put Curse on the enemy that has 10 or more ranks of Curse. But this is a condition that in the right deck is fairly easy to meet. And this is a payoff that is incredibly good value. The other epics that draw cards are like Sanctity and Crystal Research, and both of those are only going to draw you 2 cards for 3 mana. And then the only other epic that I think does better card draw, like the first time you play it, obviously you have Descent into Madness, which can draw you a ton of cards for 0 mana, but you have to loop it in order to get there. The only other card that's going to draw you this many cards that's a generic epic is Flood of Insight, which is, in my opinion, the absolute strongest new card, and one of the probably still overpowered even after it got nerfed a couple times during beta. So being second best to the absolute best is not a terrible place to be. Another note on Curse of Decrepitude is that it is a payoff card that does things if you don't meet the payoff, and that's important. You have some, because there's kind of 2 kinds of payoff cards. There's the kind where it's like, if you play this and you don't meet the condition, you have done nothing or you have massively overpaid. Here, if you don't meet the condition, you're paying 2 mana to give Curse 2 to any enemy. That's not good. We're going to talk about a card later that's going to do that for half as much as a common, but that's not awful either. That's not a ton of mana, and that's not absolute nothing. And that combination of things is very good. Oh, and it helps, of course, set it up for the next time you draw it, because most of the time enemies aren't going to be able to get rid of their curse. But yeah, I think Curse of Decrepitude is very good. And then obviously the upgraded version being a draw 4 for 2 mana and giving 3 curse is very, very good. So I think that this card helps justify the curse deck a lot more as a longer term strategy. Because I had been a fan of kind of arcane based strategies for slower decks. And I think between Idol of Emptiness making arcane based strategies a little worse and the changes to Doom making Curse stronger, that this, along with a couple other cards, that Curse-based strategies are now absolutely a thing that I would consider for any slower decks. Speaking of, moving on, number 7, Entreat Calamity. So this card hasn't actually changed. So the text on it is, it's a 1 mana skill, it's a generic common, apply 8 arcane to any enemy if it has Doom. If it doesn't, give it Doom 8. So, and then the upgraded version is 12 arcane and then Doom 6 if it doesn't have Doom. So you're playing this to apply Doom. Now, before this patch, Doom every turn did nothing when it ticked down, and then once it hit 0, it did 50 damage to the thing that it was on. Now, it is every time that it ticks down, every time they lose rank of Doom, whether that's to being dispelled with Arcane, or if they just lose naturally at the end of turn, or if they get corrupted, they get a rank of Curse. Which means that Entreat Calamity now we'll start doing damage right away. Another thing is it can help you against Purity because the Doom isn't blocked by, there's no way for the enemy to block the Doom. If you play this card against an enemy that doesn't have Doom, that enemy now has Doom. There are 0 ways for that not to happen. And then if they have Purity, Entreat Calamity will just start ticking away their Purity. It will slowly, like it's only 1 per turn, but that can be a huge help if you're relying on other debuffs or if you're trying to get curse from other cards to just have this nice, easy way to chip away at an enemy's Purity, while also, if they don't have Purity, starting to stack up some curse. And you still have that 50 damage hit at the end is the other thing. Like, all around, like the 50 damage hit, if that was all it was doing, that wasn't great. But the fact that this is now a 50 damage hit that comes with 8 turns of curse, that's a worthwhile investment. Especially because I say investment, but it's only 1 mana. So it is now the slow deck finisher that it always wanted to be. I will say I don't tend to run 2 of these. The front side of just applying 8 Arcane to an enemy is pretty bad because without help, that is not going to trigger detonation. And if emptiness is in play, even 2 of them may not trigger detonation. But that's fine because especially in those multi-enemy fights, this is pretty nice because you can, it tends to take you a while to whittle down those multi-enemy fights. And so having something like Doom to like take care of the back one while you're slowly whittling down the front ones with whatever else you have is really nice. Moving on. Number 6 is Adaptative Spell. So this is a card that I played a lot when it initially got buffed, and then it got nerfed and I didn't play it. And now it's been changed again and I'm playing it now. I don't think this is a straight, this isn't a straight buff. In particular, the card draw mode is worse now, if I recall correctly, but it's worse by a pretty significant margin actually. But it is now a even more flexible card because you now always get to choose what you get. So this is one of the cards that uses the new create one of templates. So when you play the base version, it's a 2-mana spell. You deal 5 damage to all enemies, and you create a temporary focus, introspection, or magic blast. Focus, of course, is gain 2 mana, gain 2 more mana if you had no mana. Introspection is a 3 mana draw 2 skill. And new magic blast is a 4 mana spell, deals 12 damage to any enemy, and 6 damage to all enemies. So what this means is that Adaptative Spell now has functionally 3 modes. In one mode, it is a card that costs 2 mana, but then net gains you 2 mana and does 5 damage AoE. In other words, a 5 mana card that's going to do damage to all enemies and draw you 2 cards. And the last mode is a 6 mana spell. It's going to do 17 damage to all enemies, or going to do 12 damage to a specific enemy, and then 2 hits, 1 for 5, 1 for 6, for a total of 11 to all enemies. So that is 23 damage to the target of your choice, which is not good for 6 mana, but that is one mode on a card that can be mana or card draw. And the fact that it is now completely your choice, you don't have to line it up at all, is incredibly useful. This also means that it is very, very good with anything that's going to copy spells. So like Naema has a great time with Adaptative Spell because it's a great use of Starlit Reflection. Because you can Adaptative Spell, you can focus to get mana, and then you can, maybe your second one gets you an Introspection. The upgraded version does make upgraded versions of the cards. The important thing to know here is that Introspection Plus and Magic Blast Plus both cost more mana. So that can make upgrading Adaptative Spell more expensive to use overall, with the joke being, of course, that's going to make more mana for you if that's the route you take. So kind of a mixed bag on the upgrade. Like, all of the upgraded versions are good, but it just means you have to be aware when you're playing it that, like, I'm going to need more mana to fuel this if I upgrade it. And so that is Adaptative Spell, which, is now I'm now using it in a lot of decks. I'm using it probably more than I should. I've overcorrected a bit, I think, on how much I include it, but it is just such a free card to include a lot of the time as just a mana card with other value. So it's good times. Malevolent Idol. Okay, so Malevolent Idol is now back to being a skill. Its text is unplayable. Corrupt all enemies 1 time when drawn. Give curse 1 to a random enemy when discarded. And when upgraded, it gives curse 3 to a random enemy when discarded. So the great thing with Malevolent Idol is sometimes you draw it and your enemies just die. You didn't play any cards, they just went curse splat and are gone. So Malevolent Idol has a number of advantages, a number of things that it will do for you. The first is corrupting increases the ranks of all non-damaging debuffs. So if you can get weak and vulnerable on an enemy, and then you have 2 Malevolent Idols in your deck, they're probably staying weak and vulnerable. As long as you can, if it's like 1 rank and you couldn't corrupt that turn, that's unfortunate. But if you can get 2 ranks out, Malevolent Idol will usually pick up the slack and ensure that you, from that point on, always have that debuff. It can also help you stack Shocked. It can help you stack Crystallize, which there's now a couple generic ways to get Crystallize, including Sunder, which is a generic common. And so, of course, the bigger use for it is, as is kind of indicated on the card, Curse. Malevolent Idol makes the discard Curse deck kind of work. It is like the reason you play a discard sub-theme in your Curse deck, because this means that you will get to do a lot of Curse damage every time you draw this, and it can help you apply Curse as well. I can also see an argument for running this in a Curse deck that doesn't even use much in the way of discard sub-theme, where you're just using this for the fact that it is an AoE corrupt 1 on draw. The only downside to this, and why I kind of had drifted away from this, is Malevolent Idol is really bad against Idol of Emptiness where you're getting frozen, because if you get frozen, you cannot use this as one of your cards to break frozen, so you can end up in this awful position, especially because for a while the Frigid Nullstones were also unplayable, if I remember correctly. Or maybe I'm just thinking of the Insidious. I think the Frigid Nullstones were also. But anyway, so you draw this hand where it's like, you get frozen, you've got 3 unplayable cards in your hand, and you're just like, I have only 2 cards I could use this turn at all, and now I have to play them to get break frozen, and I have lost my turn, and that's awful. But if you're not fighting Idol of Emptiness, or if you're just careful to avoid getting frozen, or if you just don't care that much, if you're willing to like accept the salty turns, this is still very good. And so yeah, it is absolutely a great card now. It is way better than the old version, which was do an insignificant amount of damage. Just it wasn't a good card. I know some people liked it. They were wrong. I'm sorry. It was not a good card. Moving on. So Royal Coffers. So Royal Coffers is now 6 mana. You create 3 treasures and you upgrade all treasures in your hand. It used to be 3 mana and you only got 1. Treasures, of course, have now changed, and that's the big reason that, like, Royal Coffers had to change for me to be playing it. It was with just the new treasures, I wasn't playing it when it was just 3 mana for 1 treasure. But at 3 treasures, this is a card. I don't know if it's a good card, actually, but it's a fun card, and that's what really matters, isn't it? So now when you play a treasure, instead of, it used to be that when you play a treasure, you just drew 1 to 3 cards at random. Now, when you play a treasure, you get to choose from among 2 of the treasure tools. And if it's a treasure plus, say because Royal Coffers has just upgraded all the treasures in your hand, including the ones it created, then you're going to get to choose from among 3 treasure tools. Plus, the upgraded treasure will cost you 0 mana instead of 1. So Royal Coffers is 6 mana to get 3 treasure tools, basically. And each treasure tool is worth 5 mana of value. Either directly, in the case of valuable gems, or indirectly in the case of something like gold pieces, which is draw 2. Brilliant Amulet, which is apply 16 of a random status to any enemy. Ancient Armed, which is gain powerful 1 and mighty 2. Or Ornamental Armor, which is gain 4 shield, tough 2, and sturdy 4. There is one treasure tool. I'm calling them treasure tools to differentiate them from the treasures themselves. Treasure tool, when treasure says create and choose 1 treasure among 3, it means among these treasure tools. There's also a 1% chance. I don't know if that's 1% per spot or if it's just like 1% chance that it will show up at all. You will be offered Mythical Crown, which is the epic treasure. And it is, I don't have a screenshot of it with no modifiers because you can't see these in the collection. You have to see them in game. And every time I get a Mythical Crown, I already have Powerful or Mighty from Ancient Arms, or Powerful, or I guess Added would be the thing. But I already have buffs, so I don't actually have a screenshot of it with the base values. But the default of Mythical Crown is apply 13 Frost, 13 Shock, and 13 Arcane to all enemies. And then they gain Crystallize 5. This is absurd, obviously. Like, that is an Elemental Conflux with added bonus. Like you get more status than Elemental Conflicts, and you get the Crystallize on top of that, just as a bonus cherry on top, and you get it for 0 mana. I mean, you do have to spend mana on getting the treasure. So like this is effectively, but creating treasure is like 3 or 4 mana effectively, in how it's costing a lot of cards, which means you are getting this obscene value for crazy cheap. Like if you play Royal Coffers and you get a Mythical Crown, that's just absurd value. And the possibility of that happening is so good. But a lot of times, because you get this choice between 3 different treasures on the things you open, you'll get a lot of choice here because like there are only 5 options here. There's a 60% chance, like if there's only one of these you want, if you're like, I need to open a mana, then there's a 60% chance that any one of these treasures will have that mana for you. And the odds that none of them will have mana for you is very low. So like, and Royal Coffers Plus, by the way, creates an additional treasure, which is a pretty good upgrade. I would argue that is probably better than an upgrade should be, but I'm not going to complain to one day because then it'll get nerfed being 7 mana, and I don't want to pay 7 mana for it. But that upgrade seems kind of crazy because with 4 treasures, you could do something like you get valuable gems plus gold pieces, and now you have gained 4 mana and drawn 4 cards. That was what your card play. You paid 6 mana to gain 4 mana to get effectively. You gained, so you paid 6 mana. You gained 10 mana. You gained 4 net, and you have drawn 4 cards. You're up 3 cards and up 4 mana. And effectively, it was free because again, we accounted for the cost of playing it and drawing it in what we already said. Also, because these are 2 cards each, if you can apply Bleed or Arcane Weakness, or if you have something like Sorcerer's Secretion or Mystical Bloom, or what's the other? Or just like you apply. No, I already said those. Bleed, or if you have Lingering Ritual, like this is 6 or 8 when upgraded cards from the treasures plus of course the coffers itself, so 7 or 9 because you play treasure, play thing in treasure, play treasure, play thing in treasure, play treasure, play thing in treasure. But yeah, Royal Coffers has a lot of scenarios where it just is very good. It is the fact that it is potentially card draw that can also be defense if you need it. It's card draw that can let you Hail Mary for a freeze if you need it. It is mana that can be card draw. It is just super flexible. And this change was fairly late in the beta, so I don't have any videos where I'm using it. But I do have one fantastic treasure run with Salon where I had 2 of these, and it was glorious and beautiful and amazing. And yeah, I like Royal Treasures. I like new treasures a lot, and Royal Coffers is a great way to try them. And also the new Demonic Read is also great, but this is the one I wanted to highlight. So yeah, treasures, they're good. Try them, play with them, love them. Moving on, Spirit Swarm. So Spirit Swarm is now a 3 mana skill. Summon 1 allied angry spirit. If you can't, give yourself and all allies powerful 1. Repeat this once. So everything before the repeat this once was its old text. It used to be 2 mana, you got the angry spirit, and if you couldn't, you got powerful. And the upgraded version was 0 mana, and you got powerful 2 and you got an angry spirit plus, but you got powerful 2 if you couldn't summon. But now Spirit Swarm Plus is still, you get an angry spirit plus, you still give yourself an allies powerful 2, but you also have to repeat this once, and that's why it's still 3 mana. So what this means is Spirit Swarm is now better alone and better in multiples. It's better alone because in fights where you have like only one spot to summon into, so you're fighting a full fight, either there's 4 normal enemies or 2 large bosses like Vessels of Corruption or Treants or Valley Guardians. In those cases, this is you get an allied angry spirit, and you and that spirit get powerful 1. If you've already played one and the board is already full, you just straight up get powerful 2. And so do your friends. And then Spirit Swarm Plus can be 4 powerful, which is really good. And this is one of those cards where it's like, once you have a Spirit Swarm, you want more Spirit Swarms. But critical mass on them is now much lower because you don't need to play that many of them to fill the board. Like previously, if you have only 1 normal enemy, then you could need 4 spirits to fill the board. So you would need to play Spirit Swarm 4 times before you got powerful, and that was if none of the spirits died. Now, you need to play a max of 2 Spirit Swarms to fill the board. Always. So, and a lot of times, one will do it. And if one doesn't do it, most of the time, either one will fill the board or 2 will finish filling the board and then give you a powerful. So it's a lot easier to start getting powerful out of Spirit Swarms. And that makes the summoning deck a whole lot stronger and more consistent. And it makes the card just generally more viable as an inclusion for these sort of mid-range decks that are trying to play a longer game where they want to stack powerful, but they don't mind having, summons because they're going to stick around long enough to get value out of them. And yeah, it's just a solid card. And it also goes really well now with if you happen to have sprites. Even if you're using sprites like the Wits sprite that won't get really any value out of the powerful, just having other ways to fill the board to enable Spirit Swarm can make it stronger. Because you just, as long as it's powerful on yourself matters, that's good value. So moving on from Spirit Swarm, let's talk about Haunted Memories. So this is a fairly complicated, sorry, my cat. Give me a second. My cat decided to jump in such a way that he unplugged my microphone cord by tripping over it. My cat is very graceful. Anyway, Haunted Memories. So you get one of 3 cards. So it is 1 mana skill, create a temporary Cursed Memory, Troubling Memory, or Soothing Memory. And so all of these are new cards that only exist for Haunted Memories. You can kind of tell from the art. So Cursed Memory is a 0 mana skill. Give Curse 2 to any enemy, temporary, and the upgraded version is 4 Curse. Troubling Memory is give Weak 2 and Arcane Leak 2 to any enemy, temporary. So this is the first time we have had easy access to Arcane Leak on a card. Previously, the only way to get Arcane Leak on enemies, by playing a card yourself that wasn't just like hoping for the weather to do it, or the Idol of Cruelty to do it, was specifically the Idol of Cruelty card Dread Blast, which is an elite card that has stasis, or the weather card, Ether Rain card, Arcane Deluge, which also cleanse ones everyone, which cleanses you, but also has the downside of cleansing enemies, so it's kind of mixed bag. Here we have access to Arcane Leak 2 on a generic common for cheap. It's 2 mana, and it's a card that has other modes, so if the Arcane Leak isn't good, you don't have to use it. So the last mode is Soothing Memory, which is just straight up gain 3 mana. So which means that Haunted Memories is in effect a mana card with other options. So the downside using Haunted Memories as a mana card is that it's a bad mana card. You get 2 mana, but also it can be affected by fatigue, so it doesn't even give you plus 2 mana. And you have to spend the 1 mana up front. And those are downsides. But the upside is, it's not just a mana card. It can also give out Curse, as I mentioned. It can give out Weak, which is great. Having a backup Weak source can be good. And also, this is 2 debuffs for 2 mana, which can be good if you're just I need to break some purity here. But this is one of those other cards I was alluding to when I said that the Curse deck is more viable. Because this card is great as a way to get additional mana. So if you're in that position where you're playing a deck that wants to have 5 mana cards, and you have 3 that you really want, and you're I need to have 2 more mana cards. I don't really care what they are, but I don't want to have just 4 mana cards. You can run Haunted Memories, and now you're at 5 mana cards, but you don't have to worry about flooding out because 2 of your mana cards can do double duty as Curse or Weak sources in the event that you don't need the mana that turn. And that's great. That's very handy to have. Troubling Memory, like I said, the Arcane Leak can be useful. There will be cases where you want the Arcane Leak. So I mentioned, of course, Curse Memory goes up to Curse 4. Troubling Memory Plus is Weak 3 and Arcane Leak 3. And Soothing Memory Plus is 5 mana. Which means that the upgrade on Haunted Memories is great because Curse 4 is very good. And going from being a net of plus 2 mana to a net of plus 4 mana also is a big improvement. It also makes it less likely to just get completely killed by fatigue, which can be nice. And the extra Arcane Leak really can make a difference because that just makes it that much easier to get Arcane Detonations off of it. So this is a really flexible card. I think it is. It initially looks like it might be kind of niche, but I think this is actually just a great. If you have one of those decks where you're I just don't know. I need 1 more mana card, but I don't know what it should be. Try Haunted Memories. You may be surprised. I think it's good. I think it's very useful. I've been happy with it in the decks I've run it in. There have been times where I'm This card doesn't do literally everything. I'm disappointed, but let's be honest, no card should do literally everything. I do think, though, that it gets a lot worse if the Curse 2 is not going to do anything for you. If you're not playing a deck that is slow enough for Curse 2 to mean something, this becomes a whole lot less valuable. So if you're playing an aggressive deck, you probably don't want this. Also, don't overvalue the Arcane Link. I kind of did it first. It is difficult, even with Arcane Link 2, to get multiple detonations out of it. If you just want to do Arcane, you probably are better off doing even just a straight up Infuse. Or ideally, I would run like a Cursed Bolt, although that, of course, has other conditions in order to make it work. But that is this card. I recommend trying it. I recommend playing with it. One more. Heroic Recovery. So Heroic Recovery is a 2-mana skill. You draw 2 exhaustion, and you transform 2 into Hero's Resolve. So if you're not familiar with how Breach Wanderer's wording works, when it says transform 2, that means transform 2 cards in your hand. It does not have to be exhaustions. And this is the change. Prior to this patch, Heroic Recovery had to transform exhaustions. And that's why it starts with draw 2 exhaustions. And that draw 2 exhaustions is still very useful for this because, like, those are great to transform into Hero's Resolves. But so Hero's Resolve is a 1-mana skill. You gain 4 shield and purity 1, and you draw 1. When upgraded, is 8 shield and purity 1, draw 1. But so what this does is, and it's removed. That's the other thing. Hero's Resolve is removed, and is removed regardless of whether the original card was removed or not, which makes it different from Reforge. So this means that Heroic Recovery is a generic transform card that just straight up deletes cards. It doesn't bloat your deck. Those cards are gone. This makes it fantastic for fighting into idols. If you're playing a deck that is fighting idols, you probably want this in your card pool because it is the best way to eat idol stones. Yes, it's arguably better than my precious Devourer strikes that I have used to save me in so many runs. Getting to just make idol stones go away is fantastic. This does get worse on characters that are less likely to have spare cards sitting around. You know, Inna can always feed tools to it. Solon, worst case scenario, you can often feed like treasures to it. Paladin is very happy often to feed charge ups into it. Naima, even worst case, can throw like astral alignments into it. Merle can throw smoke bombs into it. But like Rowden is probably the one I would say who the most is unlikely to be able to eat. Well, Kaitan hates it because Kaitan doesn't like getting purity in the first place. But that's a different matter entirely. But yeah, Rowden is the one who I would say is the most likely to be in a position to have decks that would want this effect, but don't like it on turns where you don't directly have battle stones to convert. This is also really good into Maw, because Maw gives you so much trash, and this is just like, not only have I turned your trash into cards I can play, but I've turned the trash into cards that give me purity, which means I can play more Maw trash without getting cursed. Heroic Recovery is great for fighting Maw. Like, if it is bad for the rest of your run, I might put it on Rowden and take it just into Maw, just because it makes the Maw fight so much better. Seriously, it is really good in those cases. It did get nerfed during the beta. I think I have at least one video recorded that you may see where for a while Hero's Resolve Plus was draw 2, which was obscene. That meant, and it was 0 mana. It was Hero's Resolve Plus was 0 mana and it drew 2 cards, which meant that Heroic Recovery Plus was literally 1 mana to draw 4 cards and get Purity 2 and get 16 shield and get rid of 2 cards that you didn't want, which was nonsense. So it got nerfed. But yeah, the other thing is if you have this, if you're playing Reforge, consider leaving, or if you're playing Artillery, consider leaving exhaustions around instead of just playing them out. If you know you're going to be drawing Heroic Recovery later, just so that you have some fodder to turn into Hero's Resolves. That can be useful for you. But that is my list for this time. If you enjoyed this video, leave a comment with your favorite, with the cards that change that you like the most. Let me know how much I'm right about Sanctuary being an amazing card still. I guess like and subscribe. Those are YouTube things to do. I do plan to have an AMA guide out eventually. Hopefully sooner rather than later. We'll see. I want to get it out within a week, ideally within a week of the patch dropping. But we'll see what happens. So that's going to be it for now. I will see you next time. Until then, toodles.